So hello. I want to share with you some sort of a personal story that it became NLP applied in my life. So what was the motivation? I am originally from Colombia, very far from here, and 3 years ago I moved to Czech Republic. And soon I realized that it's needed to learn a bit of Czech. And then I asked to the Czech people, what do you think? What do you recommend me? And you know what they told me when I say, this is one of the things I would like to do? Well, any guess? They say, good luck. Don't try. You better learn Italian or French, and it will be more efficient than trying to learn Czech. Anyways, I tried. And I tried going to a regular classroom, which was boring for me. I realized that I am a very bad student and I'm not good for a classroom. I tried with the mobile applications and these conversational clubs, and this didn't work for me. So at that point, when I moved to Czech Republic, I was in CVUT, Czech Technical University, and I was studying artificial intelligence. And then I say it would be cool to find something in which I can combine two efforts, like learn Czech, that is time consuming, but also build some skill in the field of AI. So this is how it all started. My first, let's say, defining the problem is that when you go to these traditional classrooms or you use the mobile apps, what you learn how to say things, but if whenever someone is replying to you any of the sentences you say, you are in trouble. And this is what happened to me many times, because I was able, for example, to say, Jimenuise William, or Yasedam Pivo Prosim. And if the guy was asking me on the way back, replying back, big or small, I was lost. So I say, okay, I know now that the problem is that the communication is in two directions, and I am overfitting, or I'm just training in a way in which I'm just learning to communicate in one direction. So I was reading papers of how usually a person can learn a language. And this is from some sort of psychology papers that I was reading. And there are many theories, but one that I like the most is that it says that you need to learn first vocabulary or sentences that are relevant to your context. And those things that are relevant, they kind of guarantee that there is an immediate impact. So for example, if I learn how to say, I want a beer, I can just use it right now. I don't need to wait till, for example, the typical mobile applications or this that you need to go to the airport or that you are in a job interview. No, you just need to learn, let's say in the beginning, things that are relevant to your context and that you can use almost right away, and you achieve a goal. So if you have been in Czech Republic, you know that if you know how to ask for beer, you have big success already in the country communicating. So moving very fast, just to focus in the NLP part, all of these things applied. I came up with a solution just for myself, in which I was saying, I'm going to use a kind of a chatbot that is going to understand intents and entities in natural language, but it has to be in Czech. I wanted, for example, to use things like the ones that you can see in the apps, that if you are stuck and you don't know how to say, so you should have some sort of helpers. So what I did, long story short, is understanding and how can I use training data in Czech to create a chatbot that was custom made for me just to learn the language, using the context or conversations that were relevant to me. That's the main objective. And why the chatbot was the solution? Because connecting to what I said about what makes learning a language faster, the relevant context is what you in a chatbot you say is kind of a closed domain. Usually chatbots today, level 3 agents, they are focused in that they are not made for open general questions. You need to have a goal in mind, and you need to have data to train the models. So it was quite difficult, let's say in the beginning, because it was like working blindly. So changing problems for other problems. Problem of learning Czech, now I change it to I want to solve another problem, that is how can I create an NLP pipeline for Czech language. So just as in general terms, all of you are familiar with the architecture of a chatbot? Everybody? Okay, so I will not spend too much here. So you all know that we need an input channel, something that understands the natural sequence, dialogue management, Usually, during the understanding, you extract intents and entities, and you take an action. This is more or less what you need to do. So you need a place where to write the message, a place where you understand the input in natural language, and you convert to something more structured that can be read into the dialogue management, and then reply back. That this is what it called the natural language generator part. So to create this bot and applying the NLP general pipelines theory, first I went to Google Scholar. And I said, okay, I would like to choose something. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And back in those days, this project I started in 2018, like in October. This is a snapshot of back in those days. If in Google Scholar, there was a very, very cool benchmark that this is still like under discussion today. Customers, if they ask me, how do you measure how efficient is the bot or their understanding? This is kind of being invented now in terms of bots, how to do a benchmark in which you say, okay, I want to measure the accuracy, precision, or any other, or F1 scores of my bot. So this was the starting point in which I say, okay, now I'm going for this Rasa library, because first there is an active community, is Python, open source. The other ones, they are very good, but you need to pay. And the other thing is that if you want to create these things in your computer to play with your own startups or your own projects, you can just download and deploy in your computer, in Docker, in other servers, if you use this one. So this was one of the first reason to choose this library. I was biased by this paper. And just a quick recap, because I know that in the context of programming, this could mean entity at least could have different meaning. So intent is what I want to do or what the user wants to do, expressing natural language. An entity is what qualifies this intent, and it's usually is giving the direction to the dialogue. If I say I want to drink, you need an entity that will be a beer. So this is kind of the two main challenges when you build a bot, and in my case, it has to be a bot that understands Czech. So let's assume that after this talk, you want to start and you want to do this thing that I did. And the other thing that is important is the timing. This project was in November last year, and it was when like now, and a year ago, and it was when the winter was starting. So I grew up in a country that is Caribbean. We learned just how to play football. Everybody was planning to go for skiing and ice skating. What else can you do if you don't know this sport? So let's build a chatbot. So what is the main thing and takeaways that I want to share with you? First, it's tempting to jump right away to the API and to the programming part, but when you start trying to escalate one of these things, you realize that it's better to start from the user point of view. So first, you should define your intents, and based on these intents, you need to define what are the entities that are relevant for those. So in this regard, and one of the other reasons that I like to use this library is that today, if you read, you will see that there are different libraries, transformers, fast text, and different ways in which you can take a query or a string and convert it to numbers and then classify this one. One of the things that I like is that in this one, from implemented in this library, is based on a Facebook paper that is called Embed All the Things. There is something interesting, and is that usually in this field, you jump to use glove or word2vec. And what does this mean? That there is already a model trained with word vectors created for you. And if one of those vectors, word vectors, is not present there, so you cannot, for example, in the case of a bot, move the needle in a conversation. And in my case, I remember that when I was checking glove or word2vec, there are not words, for example, for Branik. Who knows what is Branik? No one? It's one of the best Czech beers. So, for example, if I want to ask to the bot, ja se dám pivo, prosím, Branik, it was not detecting this entity. So, if you want to start, it could be any language, in theory. It could be any language. So, based on this approach from this paper, is that the natural language understanding engine is created, in which you don't bring a pre-trained word vector, you create your own word vectors based on your own data set. That the cool thing is that this data set, if you have it, good. If not, you can scrap the web or get it somewhere. It will be the data set that is relevant to your domain, to your business process, or whatever you want to do, and in the language that you need. So more or less this classifier, what it does is it has two embeddings that are created when you fire it up. It embeds all the sentences that the user can potentially write, and it also embeds the intents. So it creates a X, Y, all the queries, or all the input in natural language, and the associated intent. And this puts the queries of the input and the entity in the same vector space. And then when there is a new query, it's going to just rank it and select the one that is closest to such intent. So you can read more about how this works, and it has different type of uses, content recommendation, text classification, and in this case, we are classifying intents based on natural query. So having said this, this is one of the key takeaways. In order to use this classifier that I just described, there are usually a set of, and this is the famous NLP pipeline from the title of my talk. These are all the steps in the pipeline that you can potentially implement and enhance, change, or edit, whatever you want, in order to get a natural language understanding system in any language that you have data. So assuming, for example, in the case of Czech, that is the same in English or in Spanish, it starts with a white space tokenizer, because Czech, you can say that a token or a word is separated by one space from other word. And then after this, because you define the entities that you want to train the model, so there is another step where you have a CRF entity extractor. This is the one that you can find in Skylern. And why this one? Because in this use case, what we will be doing is training custom labels of my custom entities, like the Branik beer that I was mentioning. So I have to manually annotate these things. I have to say, for example, in my query or input string, I have ja se dám pivo, Branik, prosím. So I have to annotate this and say that Branik is a label drink. And this is when you do this is what you train. And this classifier there is the one that is making this for you. This is the NER, or the name entity recognizer. Then you just convert everything to back of words, and then you train the classifier that I was talking about based on the Facebook paper. So this pipeline can be used in any language with any data set in any domain, and you can train. So for example, one thing that we saw in one use case in one of the customers I work with, there are there are word vectors for English. There are, and almost all the NLP research has been around English. But we found cases for this customer where, for example, there was a word that TTM, it was different in the meaning was different in the context of this customer than the word vector that was trained. So for example, time to market was different to time to something financial. Don't ask me what, but we were recognizing something different. So even though there are word vectors in English, it was worth to try this one, because we were just training word vectors in the context of that customer. So it doesn't mean that if there are word vectors or a trained model, so you shouldn't use this. No, you might also use this if your case is too specific. Or the other one is the banking, like balance and cash means the same, but probably the word vector for balance and cash is different. And if you want to make a bot in financial services that you say how much cash do I have, or tell me my balance, they are referring to the same thing. And if you train from scratch your own word vectors with your own intents, you get to detect these ones. So one thing that I wanted to show is that using that pipeline that I described previously, this is my favorite dish from Czech cuisine. And this was just one of the outputs in which I was testing. Let me see if this can detect what is the intent and what is the entity in this scenario. And from there, for example, this is one thing that you get as an output. You get a JSON file that from there you can take it and put it wherever you want. I was told that there is actually Russian, another library called Deep Pavlov. Do you know it? So if you go to the documentation of Deep Pavlov, they are offering now something that is called Rasa skill. That is that you can take an agent like this one that was trained in this library and expose it as a skill from Deep Pavlov. So both Python, I will try the other ones. So two key takeaways that I already said, but I want to reinforce them. Why should you use this type of approach in this pipeline? If you don't have pre-trained word vectors in your language or in your context, you can bring them to the solution and create your own ones. And or if your vocabulary or words and entities are too specialized in your domain. These are two main reasons that I would say you have to ask this to yourself. And if the answer is like, yes, I should, so go for it. And now just a little example of how I did it, and it will be easier for someone who speaks the language. For me, it was kind of walking blindly. As I start thinking, okay, what is the most relevant thing at the moment? It should be going to a restaurant and ordering something. This is the traditional example, and it's so traditional because all of us, we can relate to this situation in real life. And also, when I was going through this, I learned that when you move to another country, if you have to go to the foreign police, like in Czech Republic, there is a translator. If you go to the bank, there is someone that speaks English. But usually, if you go to a restaurant, if you are a student, you go to low-budget restaurants, you don't find people that they speak English that fluently. So it's good to start from there, understanding. So I defined the intents in the context of ordering food, and then I say, okay, how can I start gathering the entities? And it was just pure Python, easy Python of using beautiful soup and all these things to selecting in the web. I downloaded menus of restaurants in Czech Republic, and then I just selected as entities drinks, beers, all the data that I needed. And also, there is in Charles University, in the Department of Linguistics, someone did as a master thesis a big data set of 38,000 words that are all relevant to the context of ordering food, even if you are the person who is ordering food or if you are kind of the waiter or waitress. So when I saw this, I say, okay, we have data. Now that I have data and I have someone who label it for me, I can just start feeding this in the pipeline, and I can get a decent NLU model for this regard. So in this solution, you have two ways to create the training data. So I was saying that when you start building this pipeline, so you need training data. And there are two ways to feed the model in training data, two data formats. So this is important to consider. And one is you can either do it in JSON file or as a markdown file. And there is important question that you will ask yourself if you use this approach in the short term, is that you want people that they can contribute with content, but they are not necessarily technical. And by technical, I mean someone who's able to edit a JSON file without corrupting it. So you should go for the markdown format, or if not, use just the JSON. So I want to show you, for example, this is how the small portion of training data for this type of agent or solution can look. So you have, in this case, I have markdown files, so it's easier to observe. And as you can see, you define the intents, and you have to label the data manually, or if you want, you can create, there are different utilities to label this data for you. And this thing in specific, this is what is relevant for my use case, and this is the way that I am collecting the data to train my model. So once you know this and you have this, then you can move to feed this data with your own entities. And I will say that if any of you want to try this approach, and it's not with my use case, that you just want to create some sparring partner to train yourself in a language, this will be easier. This will be like if I want to do something in Spanish, I know I can judge, I can label something manual, or I can just write simple program to generate this file, and I can tell if it's good or bad because it will be in Spanish. So this was more or less a leap of faith in which I was just using what I web scrapped of entities like drinks. If I use a lookup table, and if there is something that is in this sentence that is a drink, so label it like that. And this brings me also to the other input and advice that I can give you, is that there are different ways that you can start building this type of solutions. And one of the recommendations that is traditional is that you start from the baseline one, in which you have not necessarily too many entities labeled, and then you label some of them manually, or you use a lookup table. So you can see how, for example, if you have a strong lookup table that you have clean and filtered with a list of many entities in which you want to pass these entities in the training data and label it, so it can actually get higher F1 scores and precisions. And so far I have described what you have to do to understand the language. But once you understand, and let's say that you have a query in natural language, that this is your input, and then you put it in the channel, which is the bot, then you have to move into the dialogue management. And here is the other part, which is something that is very cool in my opinion, and is that in the past, let's say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, if you go to these other solutions of Microsoft or Watson or the other ones, you will see that you have to think in terms of some state machine and draw a tree, and knowing that there is lots of branches that if something goes wrong, you have to just go back somewhere. In this case, the approach is different. This is using a recurrent neural network you just tell the algorithm in this way, different, for example, type of path that your conversation can go. And this is the training data for the algorithm. And if there is one input query that looks like an intent that you predefine in this case, then the algorithm is going to predict what is the best next action. So you don't really need to worry about these state machines. You just really need to more user-oriented. You need to think in terms of the end user, what could be the path that this dialogue can have, and based on that, create training data. And if you don't have training data, there are utilities that you can interact with real users and obtain these different type of flows and then retrain the model. So I wanted to show you real quick, they were telling me it's like 2 minutes now, that this is the architecture of the solution, in which I was having 3 different instances, each one of them trained in a different vocabulary for a different goal with different domain. And an action server that is, once you are out of the NLP thing and you need to call an API, there are ways in which you can, through custom actions, make a call to a backend server, a database, or in general. And one of the cool things is that once I was kind of done with this project, in one of the customers I work, it's temporary staffing. And they were telling me, the backend to search for candidates in this company is very old, and we don't know, and the people, they don't speak English, so it's very difficult to train them to find someone. So what we did was just using only the NLU part from Czech, and we were just training a model with all the vocabulary relevant to find someone. So for example, instead of going and click in availability, click in Prague, click in Python skills, click of this, we were just saying, please, I need someone with Python skills for next week. Next week was the time entity, Python was another entity, and this was written in Czech, so no need to reskill the people, just create a channel that everybody knows how to use, how to text in Czech in this case, and from there we were querying a backend and extracting the relevant data for this query. So how long do I have? Is it counting the technical problems? Or?
Well, actually, I just asked the guys so we can continue a little bit more, if it's fine with you guys. Like, it's officially 2 minutes more, but we can talk a little bit more and then do the Q&A.
Just 1 minute, I want to show something.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So, the takeaways, I want to tell you that one of the things very, very important of this thing is that is understanding when to use one of these models, and if there is no pre-trained or vectors, you can train your own ones. You can later, when you deploy this, your best friends become the log, and the metrics of abandoning the conversation, of metrics of accuracy in terms of finishing a dialogue, and based on that, you can refeed your model and retrain based on real conversations. And another thing that is active now is that we have been starting using BERT as a service into the pipeline of this solution. We will see there are lots of literature around BERT. What I want to say is that from this point of view, and if you compare with Deep Pavlov or this one, you will see that it looks like the way in which the dialogue management is moving with deep learning, deep attention models. And I invite you to think in use cases, to think in a problem that you have, and start thinking, how can I interact with the software in a natural way? And the language shouldn't be a problem. And if you face these cases in which people are always thinking, I want to do this, but if I go to the website of Spacey, or if I go to the website of Luis or Watson, they don't have the model, this shouldn't be a stopper. And with some certain or decent Python skills, you can start building this from scratch and tailor to your needs. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. So let's do the Q&A. Who was the first? I don't even.
Okay, I have a question. From your point of view, for example, if a company works in different regions, and these regions will have their own vocabularies, dialects. For example, St. Petersburg and, well, Ryazan. Very different words meaning the same, or many words that, the same words meaning different things. Is it a good idea to build embeddings of these words as one list, or to separate them for different regions? What's the best solution from your point of view for the same language? Okay,
I can tell you what we did, and this was in Spanish. In Colombia, it's quite long, not as Russia, but it's quite a long country. And if you hear someone talking from the south and the north, it looks like a different country. So one of the solutions we did was to make our life easier. We just put 2 different containers, the same language, using different slang per region. And this is what we did: Spanish per region. Because we could observe that there are different ways, for example, to say backpack. Someone say mochila, the other say maleta. And maleta, for example, is luggage for the airport. And I'm using this example because it was for an airline. So someone was saying, how many kilograms can I bring in my backpack? But he was saying the big one, the suitcase. And he was saying 8 kilograms. So how come? It's too big. So we decided, no. So let's just split it, and we can detect from where it is coming, and let's have different language model per region. This is how we did it. Probably you can share weights, and you can share this, but the way we did it, based on my experience, just to make our life easier and for the customer, we just put different instances of NLU, and we train for different, taking into consideration the slang.
And does this separation mean that when a person from another region comes to ours, the error rate is higher for such separation?
It could be, but also, for example, in this one, there are ways, at least depending on the channel. If you deploy from Facebook Messenger, it is using the information that you have in your Facebook Messenger and sometimes your location. So for something like that, once we were doing some sort of like this, very similar to this concept, some intent-driven selector to point to a specific instance of NLU train based on if the user is saying, I am here, I want to share my location, or if you just want manually choose where you are. But yes, in theoretical terms, yes. If I go to the north and I ask something and I'm querying a model that is not the one from the south, the error rate will increase. You're welcome.
Thank you for your presentation. As I understand correctly, you are doing named entity recognition task for your chat. You said you need to find entities.
Yes.
And you were making your own data set. And my question is, how do you deal with, I had a big number of false positives. How do you deal with them?
Well, it's a very good question. The way I was dealing with that was by first using this, because there are two things here. The lookup table can be something that is curated and it has the entities clean. So there is a list in which pivot is written properly. It doesn't have white spaces or anything. But the drawback, let's say, is that with this, you are not really learning a classifier. You are just looking up in a table in some other database external to this. So this should be kind of a healthy combination that you need to know when you can use a lookup table, and there are some rule of thumb for that in my case doesn't apply. Some people that have tried this at big scale, they were saying something like, if you need like more than 1,000 entities in your lookup table, maybe it's not that good idea. And if you need less, you shouldn't need it, or the other way around. But the best thing is to try. And in my case, the funny thing is that I am the agent on production. You know, I try, yes, but it depends. When I go to a real life situation and I understand something, I was, oh, okay, this was a good one. It was not false positive, I understand. So let's say that in my case, I know this should be more serious, but for my use case in specific, I was the agent in production, and I was the one saying I didn't know this word. So I didn't have the word vector in my head, so I didn't understand, so I had to use English or call someone. And one thing that I want to show you before I forget is that thinking in terms of usability, you can, in this solution, you can call APIs. For example, one of the web services that I call is an intent that says action search word. So as you can see, for example, in this case, there are cases in which I really need to say something that I don't know, or just a word to make myself clearer. And from the bot, you can say, for example, how do you say dog in Czech? And what I was doing is training a model that is how do you say, and then the entity is the word that I'm pushing, in this case, to a translation service. And then it's giving me back the translation and parsing it back in the screen of my bot. So I could use Google Translate if I want, but I don't want. So I just did it this way that is funnier. And I log in all of this. So let's say that later, this is one new entity that I can add to the model.
All right.
Other questions?
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for your presentation. So I want to ask, like, what will be the future of NLP technologies? Like, are we going to step out of these like chatbots and conversational experiences, or we still need research in these things like building chatbots and?
I don't know the future, but I know that if you go on holidays 2 weeks and then you come back, you will see that there are like new papers, new things, this BERT, Elmo, transformers, that. So one of the things that I can say from the industry point of view, that is the customers that I work, is that it's becoming more and more important, the voice to text. So let's say that this thing is easier, but now the challenge is moving to how to recognize voice, then do the transcript, put it in text, and then send it there. So this field needs more research, and in terms of bots in general, that they are a use case of NLP, there are 5 different levels of bots. And let's say that what we have today is called level 3, that they can have some sort of context. You can go back to some questions. You don't need to repeat. But in the more advanced levels, you should be able to retake a conversation 2 days later, or ask open questions that you don't need this necessary structure of a defined goal. For this, for example, there are efforts in which this is being connected to knowledge bases. There is one guy that I saw like 3 weeks ago that he was connecting this very same agent to one of the models in BERT as a service with a huge knowledge base that he was asking, what is the capital of Russia? The model didn't have any conversation or flow, but had a huge data set trained that was doing some ranking and saying, what is the capital of Russia? This looks like this. So I pull up this answer and it was mapping a question. But yeah, there is this field is in, just take 1 week break and you're back, and there are 2 new papers in explaining something new in the dialogue management, all of this.
Okay, have you ever tried to build models on German language? Because German words sometimes are comprised of some words, 2 words, 3 words, 4 words in one. And how does it influence the model?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I didn't try in German, but there was something that we had to try for one of the customers, and that it was in Czech. And it's funny that I do this in Czech, and I don't speak Czech, and my native language is not Czech nor English. But one of the things that we did, sorry for the maybe ugly, no, I don't have it here, for the ugly code, is that we start playing. For example, this is example of training data. We start playing with the entities using bigrams. So when we were doing, let's say, the tokenization, it was not word by word, but we have to. You can use regex of all of this. But in our case, we were in the NLTK token for that purpose. We were choosing that you have to take 2 words. So don't skip in this one. So we train a model searching only 1 word, and then searching with bigrams, and then we improved the accuracy because there were many composed words that they were saying, like autopilot, something like this. Without using bigrams, it was auto and then pilot. So we were just expanding that you should consider 2 words, and then we were just plotting and comparing, and yes, by using bigrams, it was we improved the measurements.
Thank you for your work. And one more question. Previous reporter told us a lot about data versioning processes.
Excuse me?
About data versioning processes, DVC. So can you provide some additional information about how do you manage your data sets inside your pipeline that was presented?
Yes, I can share with you all the literature I have about this, and soon after this, I will share with you kind of a document in which everything I said is in some sort of form of tutorial in how to start, this slide, wait, is that I'm playing with this and I can't find it. This slide of the pipeline, this one, where I explain, or I can explain you every step and what enhancements you can do. For example, one of the things I remember is that in Czech, there are words that they have 2 accents. And without these 2 accents, or only 1, the meaning is completely different. So again, some lookup table where we found the exceptions, and in the entity structure, we were considering this. But this I didn't want to put here in so much detail. But in general terms, let's say that this is the high-level pipeline, that if someone tells you, I need it in German, I need it in Czech, I need it in whatever language, you follow this and you have some decent results. Any other question?
Now then it's time to choose
two
best questions, right? So we have one gift, another. Please choose 2 best questions.
I don't remember the question.
Try harder.
I remember with whom I engage more, with you. You asked like 3 in a row. You were doing a follow-up of questions. This is in bots, this is very difficult. You know, to keep the context.
So you have one already or no? Do you have one of them already or no? You don't?
I don't.
Okay, then have this one probably. And the second one?
This friend. Yeah.
So that one was from Wargaming, that one was from Kiwi. So just needed to mention that. So thank you again.
Thank
and
you.
Yeah, probably talk to you soon.